Hello, my friends. Today we are starting with very bad news. Unfortunately, bad news has become almost a daily thing now because the front line is collapsing. Late last night, Russia's Minister of Defense announced full control over Novoekonomichne. The Ukrainian side has confirmed partial Russian advances, reporting that a small part of the village still remains under Ukrainian control. Verified Russian gains in this area amounted to 4.7 kilometers, and the situation has seriously worsened. Yesterday, Russian forces advanced closer to Rodinske through the fields, and now they've effectively captured Миролюбівка and Novoekonomichne. They are now attempting to break through toward Myrnohrad from two directions simultaneously, which suggests that the city may soon fall. It's basically encircled, and we are either looking at urban combat or a rapid loss of the city. Late last night, Ukrainian defenders confirmed that Novoekonomichne is essentially under Russian control. The Russians have entrenched itself in the southern and northern parts of Novoekonomichne and are now establishing forward positions near the T0504 highway. The center of the village remains a gray zone. Street fighting is ongoing, and we are still holding key positions. The Russians haven't yet entered Myrnohrad itself, and the fighting is still on the outskirts. We are preparing for possible Russian infiltration by sabotage reconnaissance groups, since the eastern part of the city consists of private housing, industrial zones, and open fields, perfect conditions for small units to sneak in. We need to be ready and respond in time with mobile strike teams to eliminate these Russians. Kazakhs, don't forget, the Russians have a serious drone advantage, and they often operate in coordination with sabotage and reconnaissance groups. These drones serve both civilian and strike purposes. Stay alert and mark targets carefully. At the same time, and the Russians are assaulting Lysivka and Chernyshyne and pushing into the outskirts of Pokrovsk, Udachne, and near Kotline. Videos continue to emerge, confirming that Russian troops are already in the southern part of Pokrovsk. France, it looks like the Russians have entered the Shakhtarsky neighborhood, and that's not just the outskirts, that's already well beyond the edge of the city. Of course, it's possible that Ukrainian forces are engaging and trying to eliminate them there, which is why the southern part of Pokrovsk hasn't yet been marked as a full red zone on the maps. So let's wait and see how things develop. Please share your thoughts in the comments. But Ukrainian soldiers are already confirming that Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups are consistently entering Pokrovsk. New Russian sabotage reconnaissance groups have entered the Pokrovsk area. Some have been eliminated, others are still being dealt with. It looks like this will now become a regular occurrence. The first Russian groups were well prepared, likely from special forces or airborne troops. Now they are forming teams from regular mechanized units. So while the quality of the Russian sabotage reconnaissance groups has declined, their numbers have increased. The main Russian forces continue pressing both head on and from the flanks. Okay, as for the law concerning NABU, President Zelensky has already submitted a draft bill to parliament containing provisions to strengthen the independence of NABU, National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, and SAPO, Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. A draft law has been submitted to the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine by the President of Ukraine. It proposes amendments to the Criminal Procedure Code of Ukraine and several legislative acts to enhance the powers of NABU and SAPO. The document will be reviewed by Parliament at the next plenary session. Now, Let's return to the frontline situation, specifically in the Novopavlivka direction. Even though there were no territorial gains by the Russians over the past 24 hours, the situation remains catastrophic. The Russians are actively assaulting the outskirts of Oleksiivka, Dachne, and making breakthrough in the Yalta area and Tolstoy village. They are also storming Alexandrograd and Voskresenka. In reality, they are now advancing in the direction of Dnipropetrovsk region, and under intense pressure, Ukrainian forces are being forced to gradually retreat. In the Novopavel or Velika Novosilka direction, Russian forces are assaulting Maliivka, Vilne Pole, and Temerivka. They are also attempting to break through from the village of Shevchenko toward Komushuvaha. However, no new Russian successes have been reported in this area so far, and the front line has remained unchanged over the past 24 hours. In the Zaporizhia direction, the Russians are assaulting Malatokmachka and pushing beyond Kamensky. The advances in this sector were confirmed yesterday, and it's clear they are attempting a more serious push toward Zaporizhia. Russian activity here is steadily increasing, and they have achieved small but noticeable gains. In the Kherson direction, Russian forces continue the assaults on the islands and are shelling the right bank. However, there have been no changes over the past 24 hours, and the Ukrainian forces have successfully repelled all attacks. Now, moving to the Konstantinivka direction. Here, Russian troops are continuing the assaults on Chasiv Yar and Stupochki and are trying to break through toward Bilahora, which the Russians claim to have already captured. Fighting is also ongoing near Sherbinivka, and the Russians are attacking Rusin Yar and Poltavka. However, there have been no new changes in the past 24 hours in this direction either. In the Siversk direction, Russian forces are assaulting Dronivka and Serebryanka and attempting to break through near Grigorivka. However, they haven't achieved any significant success, and the situation remained unchanged over the past 24 hours. In the Lyman direction, Russian activity is very high, with nearly 30 assaults in the past 24 hours. Russian troops are storming Kolodezi, Shandrigolove, and Seredny, and are trying to break through near Karpivka. They are also attacking Novy Mir and Druzhelyubivka, but following their last breakthrough attempt near Karpivka, further Russian advances have stalled and the front line has temporarily stabilized again. In the Borova direction, Russian forces are storming Bohuslavka and pushing toward Novoplatonivka. Attacks have also begun on Borivska Andriivka and Zeleny High. Shelling continues across the area, but there have been no major changes over the past 24 hours, and the fighting goes on. In the Kupiansk direction, Russian troops are storming Holubivka and attempting to break through near Stepovanovoselivka. For now, the situation has stabilized and no new breakthroughs toward Kupiansk have been recorded. In the Dvorichne direction, Russian forces are attempting to break through toward the villages of Dovhenke, Petro-Ivanivka, and near Kamyanka. However, no advances have been recorded, and the Ukrainian forces continue to repel all attacks. In the Kharkiv direction, apart from ongoing shelling, there is no active movement along the front line. Russian attacks on the villages have temporarily stopped, while fighting continues in Vovchansk, although the front line there remains unchanged. in the Suma direction. Our Russian forces continue the attempts to push through toward Kindrativka as well as in the areas of Oleksievka, Yunakivka, and across the border. However, Ukrainian forces have so far successfully repelled all attacks, and the front line remains stable. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.